Hello and welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Today we are talking with Penny Barron. Penny is a natural therapist, professor, and author. Penny has had multiple experiences where she has remembered aspects of different lifetimes. She has used some of these memories as an inspiration for her novel, The Oracle of Ur. Thank you for being here with us today. We are so excited to talk with you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Absolutely. So first thing that I'm curious about is tell us what exactly is a natural therapist and what does that work look like for you?
Yes, so my three modalities are homeopathy, naturopathy, and nutrition. And they kind of span, I suppose, anywhere from the energetic to the physical, which I love in my work because I see a lot of women who have had, say, trauma or they live in a lot of stress and their hormones are all over the shop. And what I find is it usually always starts with a stress.
Mhm.
And then, we bring it back also down to the physical level too, where we support their nutrition and they're usually very deficient in a whole lot of nutrients. So with the homeopathy, we see the immune system on not just the physical level, but the emotional, mental levels as well. So yeah, we cover kind of the whole spectrum, or I try to anyway. Yeah.
I love that. I'm a holistic therapist too, so that definitely speaks to me of, working. I'm more of the mental health, energetic kind of therapist. But I love that you're incorporating, these natural modalities into healing work with people. I think that's really important.
Mm.
How did you get started with this type of work?
Um, I was the weird kid. I grew up in a I grew up in a very kind of white picket fence suburb in Sydney, and my parents they're both geologists, so they're very conventional. I mean, they're a bit off the wall as well in other ways, but they're very kind of in their work very conventional. And I was never into that kind of thing, and I was always the accused of being over imaginative and having these weird dreams and experiences. And my parents would go, "Wow, your imagination's amazing. You make all this stuff up." And it's like, "Well, no, that's my inner world. Don't you get it?" And I'd be the one that would turn up too late to a piano lesson because I was walking and seeing the beauty in the trees and not really paying attention to the time. And um, yeah, I was always the black sheep and the dreamer. And eventually, I just that's just how I wanted to be. I saw this mum who used to come and pick her daughter up, and she had this beautiful flowing dress, and she was a naturopath, and everyone was like, "Oh, she's so weird. She's a naturopath." This is back in like the late 70s, and I was like, "Wow, you're a naturopath! Wow." So yeah, I think it was just meant to be. It was always going to be my path.
Yeah. I mean, to me, what I hear is like that was authentic for you. And so it's like, even
Yeah.
though people were judging that, you're like, I'm leaning into what is right and true for me.
Yeah, and I had to go against pretty much every single aspect of life to end up where I am. So it was a bit of an uphill battle, but we got there in the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting where you get into like with the work you're doing with folks in that manner. Do the types of experiences that you had that we're going to be talking about, does that ever come
Mm.
into play with you with your practice, like with your job?
Sometimes I get little insights, like little flash. It's so weird. I get little flashes of, and it can be as simple as little flashes of a food that's a problem for them, or
Okay.
little. And I don't. I mean, I pay attention to it when it comes up, or a situation that's. Oh, I don't even know how to describe it, but I get this sense of, oh, okay, this is where we need to go next. And I'm quite a busy person in my head, so I don't always listen to it, but I try really hard to let that guidance happen for me. And over the years,
Mhm.
because I've been doing this for like 20 years,
Mhm.
it has gotten easier to get over myself enough to pay attention to it.
Mhm.
but I wouldn't call myself psychic or anything. It's just, I think we all have that stuff in us. And if we can slow our brains down enough to pay attention to it, I think everybody has that ability.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, everybody has the ability to tap into their intuition. That's what it sounds like, is your intuition is picking up on something. Do you
Yeah.
feel like it's like energetically you're picking on something from that person's maybe system, or how do you see it?
To tell you the truth, that part of it, I hadn't really even acknowledged it or thought about it consciously until the other day when this really clear image appeared in my consciousness, and it was a food that this person that I felt that I needed to talk about with this person. I was like, oh, and I don't know exactly where that's coming from, but we're all connected on that deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel necessarily that it has to be coming from me or them, or maybe it's a combination of the both of us and our energies kind of intertwining on that subtle subconscious level. And at the moment it's this big mystery and everybody goes on about how bizarre it is, but actually I think that's more normal than anything, and we've forgotten.
Yeah, say more about that. Like, when was that more normal and how did we forget, or when did we
Yeah.
forget?
Um, Well, this is where it'll start getting weird, but I guess this is strange stories, so
It
let's
sure
That's
talk
what we're
is.
about
here for. We're here for the weird.
it. I've got I always feel so weird talking about this because it sounds like I'm insane. I've got memories of um oh God, so long back, but yeah, back to the Sumerian times where I wrote a book about it because it was either that or lose my mind. They were still seeing stuff, like they were still able to connect with the, um, at least the etheric, maybe even the astral. There are different kind of layers, and you go to the
Hmm.
astral when you dream. The
Hmm.
etheric is what I understand is where all the radio waves and electricity and all of that kind of thing. So it's still kind of maybe part of the physical, but it's that more energetic physical.
Hmm.
And I have a feeling that the ancient Sumerians and around all of that time, probably up until even the time of the Christ and all of that kind of thing, that people could still see that stuff. And you see in some of the religious art even that
Hmm.
there are like craft on the churches in this big flash of light and stuff. So I reckon it's only in the last probably up to 1,000 years or so that we haven't been able to, and before that we could.
Yeah. So tell us about, where did that all start for you, starting to have these memories from different
Mm.
lifetimes?
So I've at the time when my third child, when I was pregnant with my third child, I'd been in the meditation group for probably around 10 years. I'm in a meditation group, and have been doing a lot of work, in that for a while. Um, and I went through a stage of severe insomnia, like perinatal and postnatal insomnia. So when I was pregnant and after the birth, it was hell. And I'd never wish that on anyone. It was utter hell. I think I was just so depleted. So after that, during the pregnancy, I got these really weird dreams, and I started getting really triggered by people, especially certain people that I met for the first time. But I didn't make anything of it because I was pregnant and there was just so much going on. After the birth, after this period of horrific no sleep and nightmares and weird stuff like running away in a desert under a full moon, like just weird stuff that was just not in my life, and this jumble of just like they felt like memories. Like I don't know if you've got memories of childhood where you go to maybe Disney World or something, and you eat the cotton candy or whatever it is you guys call it over there, and go on a ride, and you've got kind of these, they're a little bit fuzzy, the
Hmm.
memories, but you know that they're from your life.
Hmm.
There's absolutely no doubt that they're from your life. that's what started happening to me, but they were memories that were not from my life, but that I knew they were.
Hmm. How did that feel when you started experiencing that?
It was so jarring. And the first time it happened in a really big way was when my youngest was a little bit older, and I was at a party with my husband at the time, and I was introduced to this guy, and I had this massive reaction to him, and it was so just dislocating because there was a part of me that was going, okay, this has happened a couple of times just on a much smaller level where I've had this weird reaction, and kind of said to myself, okay, well, this might just be because I knew that person in past life. I've kind of read about it. Um, just, it's all right, calm down. But with this guy that I met at this party, I was telling myself that, but I was being like assaulted by these feelings, by these impressions. And I wanted to, it was like that guy was an ex, but I'd never ever met him before. And that is the weirdest, most bizarre feeling
Mhm.
ever, because it was like I knew him, but I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And, if you come across an ex randomly and there's all those awkward feelings and you're like, oh, yeah, that brings
Mhm.
everything up. That's what happened. And I was like, surely I'd remember if this guy was in my life. The
Right.
weirdest thing. So I wanted to rub myself all over him, like there was a lot of attraction, but at the same time, I wanted to slap him and
Hmm.
hurl obscenities at him. And then I was so discombobulated. I got really drunk. I got really, really drunk, I'm ashamed to say. And I lost, how you lose memory. And I've never really done that before, but I lost myself to the grog. And I was apparently following him around, going, "You're an asshole. I hate you. You're a bastard." And I just remember the next morning, this guy's eyes in my face going, "You don't know me from a bar of shit. Piss off." Like, oh my God. And then I also apparently followed the girlfriend around who he just proposed to. Said to her, "Watch out for him. He's going to gamble all your money away. He's going to treat you like crap. He's not going to look after you properly, and then he's just going to abandon you right when you need him the most."
It's so specific.
Yeah.
And the next morning, I copped a lot of flack for that. He was not in our direct friend group, but he was kind of in an indirect friend group.
Hmm.
So my brother-in-law, especially at the time, was they all just bagged me out so badly. Yeah.
When did you realize like more about this, like who this person was in a different lifetime for you?
Yeah. So once I got over the worst hangover I've ever had, um, I sat down in bed one night and went, I've got to know more.
Hmm.
I need to understand what that was all about. I said that to the universe or whatever you want to call it, higher self, and I got this dream. We were in the 1920s, and I don't, it's so weird because I am not her, but my memories are mine, but they're not. It's so weird. So she is separate to me,
Hmm.
but there's this thread running through the both of us. So her name was Isabel, and I can't remember what his name was. I don't know, maybe we'll just call him Peter or whatever. And Isabel and Peter were living in the US somewhere around that Reno sort of area. And I've tried to look them up, haven't found anything.
Hmm.
And their families were really wealthy. So they were both friends, and they became lovers, and they ended up getting married, from very rich families. And I just remember these little images from the dream of like curtains with peacock feathers hanging off them, and these really rich brocade, velvet, beautiful, like all of those kind of 1920s trappings. And they were around that 18, 19, 20 age. when they got married, and they were both partying, like they were both into partying.
Mhm.
She eventually, after they got married, huge, massive wedding, you know, all the trappings of the wedding. She had kids. She started getting pregnant, and it slowed her down, but it didn't slow him down. So he kept partying and sleeping around and all the rest of it. And she didn't really care when the money was flowing, but once the depression hit, the money dried up, and they had to move into this tiny little crappy apartment, which was really miserable. And it didn't slow him down still. And the end of the dream, she was sitting at this table, and it was, you know, those 1930s kind of pocked fake marble tables. It was
Mhm.
so vivid. And she was holding one of those cookie tins, you know, those metal cookie tins that they
Mhm.
used to have. And it should have had money in it, and it was empty. And then the back door opens, and he walks in with his pockets sticking out, with lipstick all over his collar, and he was like maggoted, so pissed. And she got up and she pegged the cookie thing at him, and that was the end of the dream.
Wow. I mean, so interesting that you met him at a party too, you know, like that parallel right there. Yeah.
Paralytic. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you have any theories or have you done any kind of investigation as to like during this time period
Mm.
why these things started happening to you for the first time of having these memories?
Um, that's a good question. And I've often wondered, was it just because I was really depleted and got really ragged from not sleeping, or was there a deeper reason? And I did. There's another story that kind of runs similar to the one that I just talked about, but it's more personal and a lot deeper. Um, with somebody who I'd probably prefer not to mention, but that kind of unlocked, just in a general sense, it unlocked this huge other world to me in a way, that inner world, and a whole bunch of understanding. Like there are a lot of challenges that came along with that as well, but it was to
Hmm.
do with the Sumerian kind of past life, as
Hmm.
well as a couple of others, quite a few others actually. And it triggered a whole lot more. So really all I can say is I guess that was meant to happen.
Hmm.
And it brought up all of those memories enough where I could write a book. And
Hmm.
seriously, it was either that or go insane,
Hmm.
because everything was just there inside. You know, luckily I had started kind of sleeping a little bit better. But, you know, there are a lot of issues at the time with my marriage as well. So I guess I kind of just burrowed myself into writing. Um, and I really wanted in the book to bring out not just the story of things that happened, but also some of the underlying lessons, I guess, that I'd learned in my life,
Hmm.
spiritually, life wise, or whatever. And I didn't want it to be, you know, those nonfiction kind of you can do it kind of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to have a bit of grunt, a bit of reality,
Okay. Yeah.
and to set those principles up in a story rather than proselytizing, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. Without spoilers, can you talk to us about some of those like themes and lessons that are part of the novel?
Yeah, big one, karma. Lot of
Mm.
lot of stuff exploring karma. A lot of stuff exploring, you know, in ancient Sumer, they had the ability to um, connect with not just humans, but also people of other races, from, you know, like the tablets, the ancient stone tablets that they've carved. And I got really interested in also doing a little bit of research around that.
Hmm.
And everybody says a different thing. So I thought, right, well, I'm going to make it a fiction, and I'm going to explore it from my point of view as well. And I've had to fill a lot of gaps
Sure.
like a lot of gaps. But I guess, wanted to explore the potential that we have for making those connections, not just with each other, but with what else is out there too. Some of the other ones are being able to connect also with the higher parts of ourselves, because this society is so set up for, we're just personalities, everything that we can see is all that exists and that's it. Well, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess just exploring all of that kind of thing, and our connection to whatever you want to call it, whether it's source, whether it's spirit, whether it's the gods as it was back then, that higher intelligence that kind of runs the show, I guess.
It sounds very, very fascinating, and I am very excited. We're supposed to be on a book buying ban, but then we interview people, and I'm like, well, I have to buy your book now. So I'm very interested in reading it. That sounds very much up my alley.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think, you're right in terms of like this, like maybe the way it started happening didn't feel great, of you starting to have these memories, and probably was very like unsettling in a lot of ways. But you're right, like it led you down a path of like healing and greater awareness and being able to write this book. And I think you're right, you were supposed to. That was kind of maybe aligned for you. But as you were talking, I had a memory of my friend Chantel that we actually interviewed on the podcast. I can't remember which episode number it was, but I remember her saying she's a psychic medium. And but she has the ability to kind of like filter things out, put, kind of like blocks up when she does not want to be receiving psychic information. So she
Yes.
had talked about when she was pregnant and just completely depleted, all of her defenses were down. And so that's kind of what it sounds like maybe perhaps was happening to you too, is like you were just so depleted that what your mind would typically filter out, like that filter was gone, maybe. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. And I've seen that before. Well, in my clients as well, when you don't sleep, I was seeing stuff out of the corner of my eyes. Like it was kind of awful.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's definitely an insomnia thing. I mean, I've read throughout my life, because I've been in insomnia since I was 9 years old. From 9 years old on, I averaged probably 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep a night. And when I was in my early 20s, there were times when I would go 4 or 5 days without sleeping, or sleeping like an hour or something. And after a while, you do see things that aren't physically there. And then you
Yes.
realize after a certain number of days of seeing the same things that probably it's not just your brain, because why would it be the same thing if it's just your brain? Why would it not vary? But then
Yeah.
things, they repeat and they do the same thing. They look the same. So, and I've had many people I've talked to throughout my life experience things like that. I've always kind of thought that, I mean, there's reasons why, people do vigils and go out in the woods with, a couple of gallons of water and no food, and don't let themselves sleep for 3 days, because that produces results.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the other hand, dreams also produce results. Some of the things you're talking about are things that you've dealt with dreams. And it's interesting to me that you had some of these things unlocked through dreams, and then you wrote a book. There are lots of people. There's actually an author and researcher named Eric Wargo, who's written like 3 books now about things like precognition and the nature of dreams, and how dreams and reality kind of connect to each other from a scientific viewpoint. Super, super interesting stuff. If anyone's interested, that I would definitely suggest checking out Eric Wargo. But he kind of helps connect some of those things as well. And it's interesting to me that you kind of felt a drive to write. A lot of, like, for example, like Ray Bradbury, the science fiction writer from the mid 60s. said once in a book about writing that ideas are poison. And if you have an idea, you need to get it out of your mind somehow, or it will kill you.
Yeah.
I always thought that was an interesting thought. And it kind of sounded like you kind of felt that way when you were writing that book.
Yes, it was quite a cleansing experience.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
guess. And John, being this, you're the skeptic, right?
Yeah. But
Um,
what skeptic means for me is like I'm trying to take this word back from like debunkers, because there's a lot of people who just want to prove somebody wrong, and they say, "Well, I'm
yes,
a skeptic, and this is why I don't agree with what you're doing." And that's not what skepticism is supposed to be. What
yes,
skepticism is supposed to be is, all right, you've had some kind of experience. I don't know if I agree with what you think that the reason why is, but I'm not going to say you haven't had the experience that you've had.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm just interested to hear, with your lack of sleep and what you were seeing, what your thoughts were behind that experience for you.
Well, I I do try not to go to too many conclusions, and my perspective is always going to be colored. We all of our ideas that we have as people are colored by the things that happened to us as a kid. Well, when I
Yes.
was a kid, my parents were involved in something that was somewhere between a church and a benign esoteric Christian cult.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't like a compound or AK-47s or anything, but like it wasn't like a regular like church with mass and stuff. It was somewhere in between those things. And a lot of the things that they taught us when I was like 4 and 5 and 6 very much was magical thinking, and also um esoterica, and also new thought, and also Christianity, and also there was a little bit of a cult of personality around the actual person who was running it as well. And so eh, when you grow up in that stuff, that you always kind of have this idea in the back of your mind that reality might not be what you think it is,
Mm,
because they told you when you were a kid that magic was real. They just didn't call it that. So as I was in my late teens and early 20s going through these things and sleeping 3 hours a night and sometimes not sleeping at all, and out of the corner of my eye, I would see, well, these days you hear a lot of people talk about doing things like DMT and seeing what they call the machine elves,
yeah.
um those things basically. Long before I ever heard anything about anything like DMT, there's little bipedal humanoid type creatures that would be doing something off to the side, and you can tell it's almost like being able to see around the corner in a way.
Yeah.
And for a very long time I was fairly convinced that I was just insane, because
Yes, me too.
for a long time I had not met anyone who had experienced anything like that. And I'm 42 now, so like this has been 20 some odd years between that happening and today. And in the intermediate time, I have met other people who have experienced certain things, and some of them have done it through ingesting substances, and some of them have never touched anything stronger than a beer. So it runs the range of people.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, my childhood, I came from scientists, and my parents were super not into that stuff at all. I mean, my parents don't even really get into fiction much. And if they do, it's like, the crime fiction side of things. And somehow I grew up addicted to fantasy and got into all the stuff I got into. But I will always have one foot in the skeptic camp as well. And John, I think you've nailed that, because, I mean, being a homeopath, I get my fair share of skeptics in inverted commas who just want to attack
Mhm.
and call what I do a load of shite. But I don't actually think that's a true skeptic either, because they're just negative people who like to take their shit out on others.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, they're not like asking questions or trying to dig deeper to figure out like what is the truth. It's just like, nope, that's not real, and just kind of dismissing it, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I actually did that with most of my experiences
Hmm.
without even realizing it. I was just
Hmm.
because that's what my parents kind of taught me to do. Oh, no,
Right.
that's just pretend. It was all a dream. It's
Yeah.
not real.
Yeah. What made you stop dismissing it?
Um, I felt, oh, when you go to school, and I remember being in primary school and staring off into space and going on one of my little inner rambles, and this kid came up to me and went, "What's wrong with you? What are you doing?" And so that was the start, I guess, and my parents saying, "Oh, you're going to have to come back into reality." And so because I didn't feel normal, I pushed it away, pushed it away, pushed it away. And the more I pushed it away and the more I tried to become normal, the more I hated myself.
Mm.
And going through school, I mean, I'd had trauma as well, so that further compounded it to make me not normal. I felt really alienated from everybody at school. So, yeah, pushed it all away. And then it got to the point where I was so far away from who I was. I felt this horrific yearning all the time. And I remember at the very darkest of times when I was, must have been about 17, and everything was kind of compounding then. It was a pretty horrible time for me. I had this incredible dream, and I don't even know how to really describe it or put it properly into words, but I went to this place where none of us had bodies, and it there was this incredible sense of connection with everybody and everything, and I was everybody and everything, and they were everybody and everything. So it wasn't just me being the center of it all, but it was.
Yeah.
But I was not just me, I was everybody. I was the collective, and it was this golden, beautiful, pinkish pearl pulsating just joy. And I remember waking up the next morning going, oh shit, I've got to get back into my crappy, miserable life now, going to school and dealing with these people who I am trying to be friends with, but I'm not normal enough to relate to them. They were nice people, and it felt like almost a torment that I'd been sent this incredible beauty in a dream, but at the same time, I had to deal with all of this other horrible stuff that was going on at the time. And I've never forgotten that dream. And that was kind of almost like my yearning made real in a way. There was like an acknowledgement that, yes, your yearning is yearning towards something real that actually exists inside and inside all of us, I suppose. And I started from there really wondering what else is out there or in there or beyond the personality. And I'd been told every single day, no, it's only the personality. It's only what you can see. Nothing else is real. And once you're dead, you're dead. And I kind of knew on some level that wasn't real, that wasn't right. And so once I got a little bit more freedom and finished school, I studied at uni for a little while, and then just went, no, I can't handle doing this grind anymore and working at uni towards some kind of good, respectable, solid job so I could earn a living and then maybe one day marry and have children. And that's the formula. And I was like,
Yeah.
choking to death on the inside. So I went traveling because that yearning and that restlessness, there was something more, something more. And I didn't know what it was because I'd never, unlike John, it was kind of the opposite. I'd never come across anything but Christianity. And that was, oh God, you know, I'm sure there are wonderful Christian groups, but yeah, it just left a lot to be desired, what I learnt in all of my experiences with, Sunday school and religious studies. It just didn't have the answers to the questions I needed to know. And I asked, some really hairy questions to the people who were teaching, and they couldn't answer me, and I must have been a big pain in the butt to them. So I went for a couple of years, and I didn't even kind of know on that level that I was searching. Came back after a couple of years travel and found the college, and I started studying naturopathy homeo. But I had this incredible awakening while I was away just before I came home, I was in the mountains of New Zealand and I was trekking by myself. And this is where it kind of, it really started for me. And I've always had a really busy mind, and I've always escaped to my mind if I'm stressed or whatever. The thoughts just go round and round, and I let myself get taken up by them because that's kind of a good escape. And I ran out of thoughts while I was walking on this track, and I was at the top of this mountain. It wasn't that big a mountain, but I was just standing there by myself, and my mind went quiet. And it was literally the first time I'd ever had a moment where my thoughts stopped in my life.
Wow.
And all of a sudden it was this thing where everything expanded, and I was the birds. I was the air. I was the mountain I was standing on. I was the valley, and I was huge. I was like this enormous being, and this being was it was really humorous. It had this sense of amusement, and it was kind of me, but it wasn't me. And we were having this conversation, and at the same time I was bawling my eyes out, for the amazing, the awe. And it was telling me stuff like, yes, that little sense of this isn't right. What was going on beforehand was correct, and this affirmation of, yes, I'm on the right track. Yes, I'm going against absolutely everything that everybody wants for me, but I'm on the right track. And it was just so incredible, so affirming. And for a little while after that, I was really open, and I could sense everybody, into everybody, and I could hold a subject in my mind. I don't know, whatever it was that I was thinking about back then, and I would get this stream of just stuff being downloaded into my mind. But it was, it wasn't like what's 367 times, but it wasn't anything like that, or any facts. It was just this stream of knowledge, I suppose. And I got home, and it felt like that was the culmination of my years away. Like that was what I was looking for. Came home, I was so confronted by seeing into people, because at the time I didn't understand that what I was seeing was aspects of myself mirrored back at me. I was only in my kind of early to mid-20s. I shut it down, and I couldn't cope. But there was always a little part of me that was yearning to go back to that. Yeah. So that was when I got into the natural therapies. And then I, by chance, came across the meditation group as well at the same time. So there's always been this one part of me that is still conditioned to resist all of that and know the only thing is the personality and the physical body, and there's nothing else out there. So that's in a battle with the other side that I know exists, and wishes I could just fall again into that because it was so beautiful. So that's my life. It's this battle between the two, and trying to resolve that in a way where the two can exist in harmony side by side.
Yeah. Those are definitely beautiful stories and experiences that you had. And I mean, when I hear both the dream and the experience you had on the mountain, to me, it's like you were experiencing oneness, right? Like just this interconnection with everybody, everything. And it's beautiful. And it's interesting to me that both of those times were like, you were completely alone. There's nobody else, right? There's no other distractions. There's no other opinions or, anything else to fight against. It's just your authentic self was like really coming through in those experiences.
Yes. Yeah. And I've had a couple of other awakenings like that in different situations, some of them with somebody there and other times not. And one time when I was really sick with COVID, and I took a really high-powered homeopathic remedy, and because they work on the energetic level, I had one of those experiences, it's all one, it's real.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm never going to come down. And then, of course, you come down.
Come down. Yeah. I think that's the experience of a lot of people, is like you have that intense awakening and we we can't hold it forever, because we
Yes.
do have to live in the physical world where there is the mundane reality and other people and stuff like that. But it's like when you experience it, it's just whew,
So
wonderful.
amazing.
It
It's
is.
like a drug and you want to go back.
Yeah.
I want to go back, but at the same time, I'm terrified to go back because it's almost traumatic being in it because it's like your whole personality gets shaken to its core. And then
Mm,
afterwards, it's like, oh, I want more, but oh God, I don't think I can handle it.
yeah. Like you said, like how do I integrate this like into my being, into my physical being of
Yeah.
this person that lives in the 3D as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I noticed that my personality afterwards, it holds on even stronger
Mm,
and
yep.
won't let any little peek of it out for quite a while
Yep.
after. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. It's trying to protect, in the way that it knows how to. It makes sense.
Well, I definitely get where you're coming from. Like you tried the Christianity thing, and I think a lot of people do. I think most people do in our culture. Like I mean, it's the most common things you see are people who are part of the Christian subculture, or people who believe in there is no soul and you're annihilated when you die.
Mm.
And I think that what personally I think that the reason why people gravitate towards those things is those are two different, they're both monoliths within popular culture. And so you can belong to a thing. There's capital A atheists that's still belonging to a thing. It's almost a religion itself. And then you've got, the Christians, and they are a monolith as well. They get to say they belong to a thing. And I
Yeah.
think that, it's easy to try to hide in something. And I did it myself. I spent 20 years trying to convince myself that none of the things that I experienced in my life were actually things,
Yes.
and that there's nothing past what's in front of you right now. And I wasn't necessarily successful with it, but I tried for a long time. And
We do.
it's
We try.
because it's there's something that's easy about living your life that way. You don't have to ask deeper questions if that's how you live your life.
Yes.
And I think a lot of
You get
people,
told.
that's where they are.
You get told what to think, and it's easier that way.
Yeah.
But one thing I really couldn't reconcile with all that, how in the Christian religion they say if you don't follow the Christian tenets, the rules, I suppose, whatever it's called, you'll go to hell, and you'll go to hell forever. So only a tiny, tiny percentage of people will actually end up in heaven. That means because all of us are so effed up in our own ways and we sin in inverted commas all the time. So pretty much all of us are going to hell until aside from this tiny little percentage who apparently do everything right. But on the same token, Jesus is all merciful and apparently loves us and wants the best for us. So how does that balance out? And for
Hmm.
me, understanding the concepts of this is even before I had any of the memories or anything, understanding the concepts of reincarnation really answered that for me, because we get chance after chance after chance after chance until eventually we get to that state that I've learned is actually enlightenment, not some kind of weird accepting Jesus into my heart in the shape of a biscuit and a little glass of wine or whatever it is. um,
For sure.
yeah, and because that stuff did nothing for me. I've been to church, I read the Bible. Bible's interesting. She begat whoever and swapped somebody for some camels, and And there were, in amongst all of that, there were some interesting stories that I thought, oh yeah, and you can see the parallels between that and maybe some of the Sumerian stories about the flood. All of that's really fascinating, and there was a little bit of good stuff in there. But I think my problem with the Bible is that it's been, it was in ancient Amoraic, then it went to Latin, then it went to something else, then it went to finally to English. And you can imagine the amount of Chinese whispers going on there with all the interpretations and the cultural filters that it's been put through and everything else. No wonder people just have so much trouble trying to interpret it when it's, and apparently it wasn't even written when the Christ was around. It was like hundreds of years later.
No, there actually are no historical references to the person that they are calling Jesus until 98 AD. That's the first historical reference to that person. The first reference that ended up in what we call the Bible was written in 66 AD. Which would be the Gospel of Luke. It's been a long time, but Luke, I believe, was the first one. That would have been written in about 66 AD. And the reason why I know that all this crap is I actually stayed in Christianity until my early 20s. I actually almost became a pastor. I didn't
wow!
really.
So you know a whole lot more than me.
Well, you just the things that you've just said tells me you know more than the average Christian because you read the book and most of them don't. The average Christian has read like 30% of the Bible, if that.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Most of them have not read that document. But what most people in and out of that religion don't understand is, depending on what version of Christianity you have, you got anywhere between 66 and 73 individual documents that make up the Bible. That's different books within what they call the Bible. They were written as old as 2,500 years ago and as recently as 1,800 years ago. And they've taken these things and they've more or less agreed on these core things, and they say then that is a book. Well, it's 666 books, and you're putting them in the context with each other, but they're written in different cultures, in different. I mean, even if the location is the same, and most of the time it's not, the people doing the writing have different value systems and different beliefs. And so you're trying to equate basically like 900 to 1,100 years worth of evolved belief as to be the same religion, and it's not at all. And adding into a lot of things like with modern Christianity, most of the stuff that modern people think about with Christianity comes from Renaissance sources. Dante's Inferno talks more about hell than the Bible does.
Yes.
That's just
and I understand also from what I've learned in the meditation group that hell feels like forever, that we all go through various states of hell while we're in our bodies and out, but hell doesn't last forever. We go through hell, it feels like forever, and then we come out the other side, and we whether we're in the after death condition or whether we're in our bodies still, it feels like forever, which is why that there's that belief that we go to hell forever and then we never come out. But I mean, to me, that just seems pointless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like just some of those teachings, I was like, but hang on. What?
Yeah, this doesn't fit for me.
Doesn't fit. Doesn't add up.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the meditation group that you're in. Like what kind of meditation practices do you do in that?
So it's called Foundation for Higher Learning, and it's basically this synthesis, I suppose, of East and West. And the teacher's name is Imre Valion. So I remember back when he was kind of he's not teaching anymore because he's very close to the end, unfortunately. But he used to kind of tell the story about how a lot of people thought that he was full of shit when he said that he wanted to kind of unite that Eastern way of thinking and the Western way of thinking and bring about trying to work out what was the core of the great religions. You know, they're all based on this beautiful, amazing, you know, bringing ourselves back to oneness, bringing ourselves back from that separate consciousness, that consciousness that we're separate islands, and being able to kind of walk that path back to unification and all of that kind of thing. So it's, John, it sounds like from what you've done in your esoteric travels, with, you know, what you were doing in your childhood, there's probably quite a lot that you covered then. So that it's what we do is like a mix of wisdom talks, looking at the structure of the universe, the structure of a human being, how a whole bunch of stuff works. And then there's the practices where we do sound work, or we do mantra or chanting or stuff like that. So experiential as well.
That's very
That
interesting.
sounds really interesting for sure.
Yeah. I love that. Is that something you
Yeah.
do in person, or is that something that's online?
These days, both. Since COVID, it's both, but it used
Mm-hmm.
to only be face-to-face, and then they have these retreats that you go to if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where kind of the new energies are brought in.
Mm-hmm.
I've got those books. He's written this incredible series called Heavens and Hells of the Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically kind of like a whole bunch of info on you know, how the universe is and the structure of a human being, all of those kind of, I guess you'd call it basics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
it is. Yeah. And ironically, you know, with the meditation group, the philosophy is all about being in the present. So it's also been really weird for me having all those past life memories and writing about them and doing all of that, and being in a group that's all about letting go of the past and being in the moment, and not not going back to the past. So
Yeah.
but I can't do it any other way. So
Mm-hmm.
they're, you know, very highly tolerant of whatever you do, as long as it's for the higher good.
Yeah.
But it's been a little bit strange, that bit.
I'm sure. But I mean, truthfully, those memories are coming up in your present, even though they are something from, I don't, and I just kind of have the belief that like time is not linear, right? Like we've talked to a lot of people who
Yes.
kind of come to this consensus of like time is happening all the time, not in a linear fashion. So it's like those
Yes.
aren't even really past lives. Those are alternate lives or different lives, right? Like happening in maybe a different dimension that we can't even really conceive of. So, but it's coming
Yes.
into your present moment now. So to me, you are being in the present. That's how I see
Yes,
it.
that's true. And actually, there was a talk that I listened to the other day, and it was talking about how in eternity, or in the eternal, once you're connected with that, it's exactly as you said, it's all already been done. We're just going through the motions,
Hmm.
but it's all incorporated into that eternal oneness
Yeah.
somehow. Our brains just can't work that out.
Yeah. I think, our brains just like that linear timeline, right? And that's what we're experiencing here in this dimension. But I think there's just so much more at work that we have a hard time wrapping our brains around.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
You had mentioned that one of the memories you had came from Atlantis. So can you tell us about what some of those memories were, and maybe a little bit of like what you remember like in those memories, like what that civilization was like?
So I actually have written a book on that bit as well,
Okay.
but it's really raw, and I didn't focus on that because I was focusing on the other one. I've got a bit of ADHD, so I tend to do like 5 things at once. That one, oh God, was kind of towards the end, that lifetime, and she was around for the fall. And it was funny what came out when I was writing it. She grew up in this tiny little village on kind of the other side of the mountains to the main, the city of Atlantis. And she had to make this trek across the mountains to join up with, there's a whole story around it. Anyway, back then they used the pyramids as power producing, and they did a lot of mantra and stuff in order to produce power. And everybody was able to see, everybody. But even back then, towards the end, that was when there was a lot of darkness going on and a lot of black magic. So people, rather than just beating each other over the head like they do these days, they used a lot of cursing, making curses and flinging them and fighting that way. But there were, even then, people were starting to lose that ability. And the flood, they kind of brought it on because there was this enormous imbalance of horrible energies that the earth couldn't handle. And so there was, a massive earthquake. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that happened. And that's why they all died, because of the hideous darkness that they were doing. And in a way, there's a lot of parallels with our society now, because we don't realize, but we're still using that stuff, that darkness. But we're just not really aware of it. We lost the ability, basically, to use that stuff. We lost the power to do that in Atlantis because it was so misused. But we've still retained a little bit of that today. So, I know somebody who wished her husband dead, and the husband was abusive, but he died. So these things still happen. It's just we're not really believing that they can. Yeah.
Do you see that as like how people would talk about like manifestation, like your intention is directing the energy and kind of co-creating the reality that you're living in?
Absolutely. We are creators. Thank you, Brittany. I was getting a bit lost there in the mishmash. But that thing where we get told in the personality world that whatever happens to us is just random. But that's not true. We're creators. And, people go around going, God doesn't exist because we've got this horrific situation in the world now. No, we've created that. That's all us.
Yeah.
We're creators, and we can create differently if we want to. Just looking at the political situation over in the US at the moment between those two, oh God, and it's kind of similar in Australia, and all I hear is everybody going on about how shit our leaders are. Well, how about en masse we envision what an awesome leader might be? Go and how about we create that en masse?
Yeah.
Instead of just sending hatred towards they're crap, but at the same time, complaining and sending shit vibes to them, it's not going to make them any less shit.
Yep. I will join that movement with you.
Yeah, let's all have a movement to visualize awesome leaders.
Yes. Yep.
Our countries.
Peace and harmony, and
we need to make better choices as a people, at least here in the States. We just need to. I don't know how it is where you are on a national level, but here, the idea that the two-party system is the only thing that can happen is so ingrained that people just go along. They just go along with it. They just go along with there's two parties, and that's just what it is. It doesn't have to be. That's not what it was originally envisioned as, and it does not have to be that way. But until people decide that it doesn't have to be that way, it's going to continue to be that way. So we need to make better choices. But people they've almost forgotten that they've got the ability to make a better choice.
Yeah, it's so disempowering. And it's the same in Australia. Everyone's just going along with it, watching the footy, having their little, amusements, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
But I think you're right in terms of like it has to be a collective movement. Like we can envision it, right? But
Yes.
but yeah, we need a lot of power, a lot of energy, a lot of different choices, like Jonathan's saying, behind it to really make
Yes.
that shift. So if anybody else is listening, join the movement with us. Let's all envision.
And I think that's starting. I know in Australia, when the whole COVID thing happened, there was this repositioning of society and a polarizing, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But at the same time, those people who didn't necessarily agree with what was going on, they started forming their own community, and there's been this real movement of people who are looking for something better, who want to start to work towards something different than just.
Mm. I have not seen that in the United States.
Oh,
I don't,
I
I
think.
mean, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, I have talked to a few people in the
Have
United
you?
States where they've got their little pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So
I need to
maybe I'm
find
not.
that pocket. Yeah. I mean, I think what I see is that there's more people who are interested in the spiritual and metaphysical. So they're
Yeah,
more interested into a spiritual metaphysical healing path, kind of exploring that reality isn't exactly what we've been talking about is, the personality and stuff, like there's more to it. So I have been seeing that's my personal experience. I see
yeah,
that
me too.
more
Yeah,
getting more popularized. And so I think it just requires, like, all right, let's take it the next step further from the individual experience to more of the collective. How do we shift what this reality is like for everybody?
and I think that needs activism, and not
Mhm.
tying ourselves to trees activism and
Yeah.
waving banners, but maybe that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
But that inner activism, that decision, okay, and I think it starts with our own little bubble, making our
Hmm.
bodies and our lives the best that they can be, so we're not trying to escape all the time. And then that bubbles out to other people,
Hmm.
sharing that.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
And people go, how can I do this when it's only just me? Well, you start with you, and then you
Hmm.
start attracting others who are like-minded, and then it grows.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me feel more hopeful.
Hopefully. Yeah, that's what we can do, really, isn't it? That's all we can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we've covered most of my questions. This has been super interesting for sure. I really appreciate you coming in and be willing to talk in public about this stuff. I've said multiple times through these things that somebody sharing an experience that's a little different might help somebody else realize that they're not crazy.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
oh, somebody else has had this kind of dream before, has had this kind of experience before. And yeah, I just really think that it's valuable to have these kind of conversations.
Me too.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing, for being brave. So, where can people find your books?
I'm up on all the, on Amazon and everything else. I actually was published through Ozark Mountain Publishing. That they're awesome. Actually, they've got some really amazing books. Dolores Cannon, but they
Oh,
decided to do a fiction branch.
uh-huh.
So yeah,
Awesome.
that's where it's published through, and it's yeah, they've put it up everywhere actually.
Nice.
And book two, so there's three books in a series. So book two is at the editing stage at the moment, and I'm just
Nice.
starting to write book three. So, ooh, yeah, it's all happening.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
We will definitely be getting a copy.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm on
Absolutely.
Instagram and Facebook and stuff, so I can send you the links.
Oh, please do. Yeah, we'll link that in the show notes, and yeah, we'll link your books, and yeah, any other, sites that you have or social media, we'll definitely link for you.
Just wanted to say thank you. This has been really fun, and
Yeah.
I really love talking about this stuff. So I love all of these opportunities now for podcasts and Zoom and all that stuff that we
Yeah.
can online and have these awesome discussions. So thank you for making that possible.
Absolutely. We love it too. That's why
That's
we
what
keep
we're here.
doing it. It's
Yep.
it's been a huge not something that we knew was going to happen, but it just kind of started happening, and I just love conversations with interesting people. So, yeah, thank you very much for participating, and
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. All right, you take care.
Thanks, you too. See you
Mhm.
later.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.